absolutely insane. We're trying to figure this out, but I'm going to tell you, the good news is it's not a lot that's on our end. So we are doing our best to make sure we're consistent about things. But today we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Israel is undoubtedly at war. That war is going to intensify. Iran is going to see some things that I don't think they have ever seen before as a nation. I think the Middle East is going to get rocked by some of this. It's already pretty bad, but I think things are changing pretty rapidly. We're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about some of the internal politics in Israel that's leading to the formation or the change of internal politics in the United States of America. We're going to talk about military supplies. Of all things, military supplies. We're going to talk about that. Logistics. And you know, one of the other things that we're going to end up talking about is we're going to talk about what that means for what we know is going to happen very quickly. I'm guessing within the next couple of months. And there's a lot to be had. By the way, I didn't even tell you we're going to talk about this, but it just came to mind, and I think we have to. Saudi Arabia. There's an interesting dynamic that's coming out of Saudi Arabia that is surprisingly to the world, but for those of us that study Bible prophecy, not so surprising, but surprisingly refreshing in that Saudi Arabia is taking a more aggressive stand with respect to how it is going to support Israel in the context of normalization. And the outer fringes of that normalization centers around the military stand that they are taking. Let me call it this. The non-military military stand that they're taking, especially with the nuancing of Russia. They're doing something with Russia that is changing things a little bit. So we're going to talk about all of that.
Where do you want to start?
Well,
because there is a very interesting aspect with Saudi Arabia that's happening now, and we're starting to hear more of it. It started probably a year ago, and that is the delegitimization of the connection or the disconnection of Jerusalem to a Muslim holy site.
Yeah, and that, by the way, that right there is a very important thing, right? And it's interesting that you would bring that up because it's becoming a bigger problem with Jordan right now, okay? But the dynamic is deeper than that, in that MBS is on a mad race. And when I say a mad race, I mean a mad race to change things with respect to the perception of Mecca, because many of the scholars are coming out. And when I say many, I mean many of the scholars are coming out right now and are debunking the issues that relate to the credibility of the Quran and the existence of Mecca as a viable city that was at the center of trade and the world in the 6th, 7th, and 8th century.
Wow.
It didn't exist. Mecca did not, the only Mecca that existed in the 6th, 7th, and 8th century would have been the Mecca that would have been near the Jordan area.
Okay.
So you're talking about MBS recognizing this.
That the whole Muslim narrative is unraveling.
It's very much unraveling. And it's funny because this is why you're watching MBS doing things like hosting sports events. That's like he's taking on soccer and there's all kinds of stuff that the guy is hosting that he's actually beginning to go out of his way to take on. And it is something that shouldn't surprise anybody. So it's a pretty significant thing.
Should we talk about narratives unraveling and re-raveling?
Yeah. I mean, this is all very important.
Should we talk about Christopher Columbus?
You really want to go there? But wait, okay, so let's talk about Christopher Columbus maybe after we get through some of these major things. Okay. Because Christopher Columbus is going to send us down a massive rabbit trail. Well, you do understand that, right?
Well, it's a Balagan connection. It is a Balagan connection.
You know, probably one of the world's most famous Jews, by the way.
And here's the thing. I have a really interesting connection about this, and we'll get to that.
That, by the way, is a very, very interesting narrative. By the way, did you hear, speaking of that, I want to leave this alone. Did you hear that one of the newer lies about Jews is beginning to resurrect in Columbus, in now that Columbus Day has happened?
No.
So now, I don't know if you noticed, but they call it National Indigenous Persons Day instead of
Okay.
Columbus Day, right?
Okay.
Which is kind of the flip side of honoring Christopher Columbus. And now they're saying that Jews have always been colonizers of people of indigenous lands
okay.
because of Christopher Columbus
Okay, I
and what
got it.
happened with Spain. How insane is that, by the way?
Okay. Do we want to start or we want to end with
If
this?
by colonizers you mean no,
we wanna start
we're
or
going to
we
get
wanna end?
distracted. We'll get distracted. We end with Christopher Columbus because we're not going to deal with the issue that we need to deal with, and that is Israel's next move on Iran is imminent. And I'm telling you, whether or not anybody wants to believe what the common narrative is concerning that, we have a massive issue on our hands.
Okay. We have a very, very big issue, and it's much more complicated than people thought. If you'd have asked me a week ago, you did, and I answered. 2 weeks ago, you did, and I answered. Israel was going to strike Iran, and it's not happened, and there's a reason that it's not happening, and I'm kind of worried about the reason, and I think we connected to that along the way.
Yeah, and we do need to talk about that. The one thing I do want to do right off the bat is I want to thank you guys that are doing super stickers and super chats. You guys are awesome. Brad, you're just funny. Let me read just a few of these really quickly, and then we'll go from there. Watching Tim Waltz try to load that gun, in his defense, it was different from the one he used in Italy, I mean Iraq. The only thing he can get loaded is himself before taking a drive. You know what's funny? I asked some of my guys about this because he struggled so much with that gun that it actually looked like to me he was trying to unload it, not load it. But I could be wrong.
You want me to make an interesting connection about this?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know that the guy who pushed the Iron Dome ahead was an Israeli minister, okay, called Perez. Long story short, he was the Minister of Defense when the decision was made to create the Iron Dome. But he lost his political career because he was on a military maneuver, and he held up the binoculars backwards.
Wasn't this the prime minister's younger brother?
No, it was.
Wasn't he
else.
related? He was like the cousin of the prime minister of Shimon Peres.
No, it's not Shimon Peres.
But he was related to him, wasn't he?
He was part of the party, but it totally ruined his career. By the way,
I didn't know that. By the way,
By
I
the
knew
way-
his career was ended, but I didn't know that was why.
totally. But he was instrumental in pressing the button for the Iron Dome, when we were deciding. Now there was an American ship captain, same thing.
Oh yeah,
They got a picture of him.
we did a video on that.
So what I'm trying to say is, if you don't have a military background, don't take pictures of yourself and post them on social media doing military things, because the good chances that you're not going to do it right.
Or this, don't post yourself on social media doing something you haven't practiced forever. Like, here's a great example. I think he's a great American, and I really love him, and I think he's a sweet man. He's young in his relationship with the Lord, but Vinny from the PBD podcast, the Pat Bet David podcast,
Yeah.
there was a video of him shooting at a shooting range with Pat Bet David, and he was doing some of the most incredibly unsafe things in the world. And the man is a seasoned vet. The man is he served our nation faithfully. He's very well acquainted with weapons, but he was making some very serious safety mistakes.
Well, I saw a video.
But that's what happens when you're not doing it a lot.
I saw a video of somebody that I know who was very, very proud of him on the shooting range. But when you look at it closely, he had the gun pointed at his toe at least 3 times while he was running around corners. So, I mean, you get that. But, okay, why are we being too bad? I mean, I've been, watching a series called The Rookie on, I think it's on Hulu, about policemen and cops. And, it's really fun, and the stories are really amazing. But they're driving me crazy with their unprofessionalism. I mean, they're shooting off 3 magazines and not hitting anything.
It's ridiculous. Some of this stuff is such a joke. It's not even funny.
Okay, but I guess that would be okay. So here's the thing: when you watch a war movie, I mean, by the way, there are some that do a very good job.
Oh yeah.
Okay. For instance, as a tank commander, if you want to see a good movie about tanks, watch Fury.
I thought Golda.
Fury.
Well, the
Fury.
the Golda movie was really beautiful.
But Fury was, I mean, to give you the feeling of what it's like to be inside
of a tank. Yeah.
Fury.
Because wasn't in the Golda movie you were listening to the radio traffic and you said just the hair on the back of your neck was raising?
Yeah. Golda. There are a couple of them, yes. But what I'm trying to say, there are sometimes, but usually, I mean, anybody who's know anything about airplanes knows that Top Gun is totally crazy.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, but the first one and the second one. But
well, it's really funny because I have a dear friend who's an ex F-15 pilot, flew a bunch of missions, and actually he has one of the larger YouTube channels that deals with flight safety and so on and so forth. And he would never do even a tenth of the things, and he was a great pilot. He would never do a tenth of the things that you would see on Top Gun. You know what I mean? Because look, the FAA, okay, forget the FAA, the Navy would literally, or the Air Force would literally ground any pilot that would even fly at the wrong altitudes. That's how serious they are about that stuff.
Again, it's the difference between reality and showmanship.
Yep.
Which brings me or segues into the first thing that we want to talk about, and that is the technologies are very, very complex sometimes, and the professionalism is very complex, but sometimes low tech gets through it.
Yeah, look, and this is a big discussion. Let's do this. Let me finish through this. These super chats. Brad, thank you for the other ones. Israel really effective at taking down foes, even more effective than Hillary. That's actually pretty funny. And then, Brad, you also say, and so you don't get in trouble. I was raised in a middle-class family marked by the passage of time, and I am unburdened by what has been. He's Brad, you're just brilliant. That's all I have to say. And then, Pookie, thank you on your question that you have here. We will take it at the end. You'll be the first question that we take. Thank you for your support, by the way, on Rumble. Okay. I also want to say this for all of the super chats and stuff. Thank you guys for that. It's a blessing when they come in. They are a huge help to us in what we do. But here's a question. Okay. When we start looking at this issue that you're bringing up, the drone issue. Okay. What in the world, bro? What has happened with? So let me just ask the obvious question, and then we'll get into the bigger discussion that we were going to get into. How is it? And obviously, this is a rhetorical question on my part, but this is a question that demands an answer for many people that might not know the answer to this. How is it that we have the most sophisticated mathematical algorithms in something like the Iron Dome that can actually intercept anything at any speed based on an existing trajectory without any real guidance or anything like that other than simple IMUs? How is it that we can develop something that sophisticated that can take out anything with a literal 98.2% accuracy? Used to be 95, now they're saying 98.2, especially because their stats have changed because of Iran. Here's the question. How can you have a system that sophisticated and yet at the same time struggle over these drones? Can we talk about that aspect of it first, and then we'll talk about the problem of the drones?
Okay, so we all know what a drone is.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's basically made of fiberglass, explosive, and probably a lawnmower type engine. Okay, and the rest is fuel. One of the main problems with drones is not taking out when you get it, okay, but identifying it, picking it up. Radar goes through it. Most radar goes through it. They fly low and slow, which means they're in the valleys. They're actually flying through the valleys. So the radar, which actually, by the way, when you see the difference, we're picking up the drones over the sea. I don't know if you know, but there were 2 drones that were actually aimed at one of the oil platforms on the same point that were directed towards the oil platforms. Those drones, same kind of drones, were taken out. Okay, the reason is it's easier to identify it over the sea. It's harder to identify it when it's flying in the valleys, and that's basically what they're doing right now. By the way, the Russians and the Ukrainians are fighting a drone battle, and they're not really. Nobody's really found a solution to the drone problem as of now.
I guess the big issue to me is how is it that that's the case when the technology that drives these drones is so nominalized that the counter technology to destroy them is not difficult. I need you to explain this. I understand the answer. I understand the conundrum. I need you to explain it to people that don't, because this is a big issue to a lot of people. And we bring this up because there was a recent drone attack that Israel suffered
That brought more casualties than the Hezbollah has in the whole war.
I mean, it's crazy. 4 IDF soldiers were killed.
Yep.
Over 60 of them injured.
Yep.
It's unbelievable the effect that this thing had. And by the way, it was in the air for what, an hour and a half, 2 hours?
2 hours.
2
No,
hours.
and then here's the thing: they picked it up.
Yeah, they picked it up. There
But they
were
lost it.
F-35s that were chasing it. Correct?
I think helicopters, but I'm not sure. Okay, maybe.
Oh, so there weren't fighters. My understanding was they were.
I'm
It
not
was
sure,
their.
but they had picked it up. They had. They were about to intercept it. They lost it in the ground clutter, and the fact is that they didn't know where it was. So the siren wasn't hit, and they managed to drive it into the dining room of a army base that was having breakfast with soldiers that had just now been called up. I mean, 18-year-old soldiers that were in their basic training. That's why it was so concentrated and so hit. So it was a kink in the armor that we do have to find a way, but nobody has a solution for picking up the drones. When you pick them up, if you identify them, you usually take them out. But the identifying the drones is a problem. The technology that I think they're going to use is, I mean, anybody who's been in an environment with drones knows that one of the things that is very distinctive about drones is their noise.
Yep.
So now they're talking about acoustic sensors that pick up the noise as much as the visual or the radar sensors that actually shoots radar and returns it back. So that's going to be something. And I think in the war of tech and low tech and high tech, I think we will overcome this soon. But there is, like everything else, there's a short gap until people figure out how to deal with it. We had that with the drones. We had that with I don't know if you remember, 1973 in the Yom Kippur War was the first time anti-aircraft missiles were used on missiles.
Yeah.
And a lot of Israelis lost their lives to anti-aircraft missiles and anti-tank missiles that were brand new back then, until we've managed to fight off or find a way to overcome them. So there's always technology and counteractive. But here's the thing, and one of the things that I think is really important, and we need to remember that here, and I'm going to even say there's a life lesson even into this. Sometimes you put together the technology, and you've got the whole armor, and you've got everything ready, and sometimes the enemy can get through with something that is so basic and so low that we're dealing with this kind of threat, and we forget that sometimes the threat is a regular kick in a sensitive area, and that can overcome. And basically, that's what they did.
Well, and this is the big problem that we're facing right now, and that brings us to probably one of the more significant issues in front of us. And by the way, the issue is significant. By the way, Vinny, thank you so much, man. God bless you. We love you, brother. So definitely, I believe it's in the future, in the near future. I don't even think it's the far future. It's the near future that Iran is going to have their nuclear facility destroyed, their facilities destroyed. I know that Bibi supposedly said that he wasn't going to do any of that. I think that's not true. I think that's a diversionary tactic. I think he is going to destroy their nuclear facilities. I think he's going to destroy their oil-producing facilities as well. He has to, or at least his energy production facilities.
James, at some point we're going to be having this discussion afterward.
Yep.
And I'm afraid, and again, this is my Israeli mentality, I'm afraid that we're losing the window of opportunity on this one. And from what I'm hearing coming out, both from Israel and from the United States is really, really putting a lot of pressure on Israel to back down on this one. In fact, I think I read somewhere that the New York Times said that Bibi has agreed with Biden not to do anything that will impact the elections.
Yeah, and I can promise you, if Bibi said that, if Bibi made any kind of a statement like that, I can promise you that's only because Bibi is posturing the position of Israel in the best scenario possible to get Trump in office. So I can guarantee you that if you talk about October surprise, I can guarantee you if this attack happens, and I believe it will, that it's going to happen near the end of October, within probably the next few weeks. And the reason why is because with a slight functional destabilization of the region, it is going to take those people that are the undecideds that are here in the United States of America, and they're going to go, we have to vote for Trump. The Middle East is falling apart, and I think Israel will do anything it can to put that in that position.
So we are on the verge of a make or break. We have a saying in Hebrew, talash or tarash, which means you either get a Medal of Honor or you get, how do you say?
A smash. Like
no,
like
how do you say? Unhonorable discharge.
Yeah, like you're cursed. You're shamed.
The line between a Medal of Honor and a dishonorable discharge sometimes is like this. We're on that point right now.
That's right.
And the whole Middle East at that point. And one of the things maybe I need to kind of illustrate to people that don't really see the picture that is being created out of the details. The situation in Gaza, the situation in Lebanon, the situation in Iraq, the situation in Yemen, is on the edge. I mean, Iran has created these proxies, these tools, has put in place these mechanisms. Israel has smashed the Gaza mechanism. Israel is smashing the Hezbollah mechanism. And it's either Iran gives up on all of its tools of the trade, or it turns this into a fight between us directly and them.
Iran is playing right now on the political weakness, not of Israel. Iran is playing on the political weakness of the United States of America. Let me tell you how significant that political weakness is playing out. Exactly. Right now, there are news stories that are getting published. We know it. It's verified. Like, these are vetted stories, of Iran having a list of the top 15 Trump advisors, national security advisors, that hitmen, right? So you're talking about Bolton, you're talking about some of these other people, and there are legitimate, identifiable threats that has now officially forced the Federal Bureau of Investigation to go and to brief all of these Trump-era people.
Well, the question is, do they put the Secret Service on them?
Well, so that's the big debate. And the problem is they're outwitted with resources for the Secret Service. We already know the track record of the Secret Service so far in seeking to protect Trump. But now they're talking about the idea of having to restructure the way they're doing dignitary protection on the fly. And what that tends to do is it tends to be a play on the weakness of the leadership that you find in Washington, because if they become more and more scared of their lives, they're going to react two ways. It's going to be a fight or it's going to be a flight.
Okay,
and I promise you they're going to run.
I find this fascinating that this connects to what we were talking about before.
It's a direct connection.
Because this is what Iran has been doing. Iran says, I can't deal with the power, the economy, the technology of the West. But what I can do, and here's how the enemy does it, Let me see if I can illustrate this in a way that sounds weird, The enemy says, I can't buy bows and arrows for all of my soldiers. But if I buy two arrows, and I fire one arrow at my enemy, and an enemy gets hurt, I will make my enemy buy armor and shields for the whole army because they know I have one more arrow.
That's right.
You understand what I'm saying?
That's right.
So and again, the drone issue is the same thing. The technology is the same thing. The fact that I hit you with one arrow, You know I have one arrow, okay? That's the only one I have. But in order for you not to be hit by that last arrow that I have, you're going to have to buy shields and armor, and you're going to have to move around in heavy armor for the rest of this war. And by doing that, I have created a situation. For instance, Iran knows it can't take out all of the political advisors of Trump. But when they make this public, then we have to invest in all of this shielding, defense, posturing. 9/11 was a classic example. 9/11 didn't destroy the United States of America. But because of the option of 9/11 and another option of 9/11, the whole United States of America has to take off their shoes every time they get on a plane now. 7th of October did not destroy Israel. But because the threat of a 7th of October happening again, we have to change the whole Middle East in order to make sure that this doesn't happen. That is how the enemy works.
100%.
And that is something that we need to see, that there's a bigger picture. They've got two arrows. They use one, they damage, they get a drone through. Now we have to defend from these drones all over the rest of the country. Okay? And again, there's a technological, military, geopolitical aspect to this. But I want to say this, there's a personal aspect. The enemy, Satan, finds the kink in the armor. And sometimes we think we have this big armor, we have this technology, we have everything, and we forget that we leave a crack, and that crack will be utilized by the enemy. And that's, I think, to a certain extent, what we're seeing on all these different levels.
Yep. Oh, that's 100% correct. Your assessment is dead on, but we have to take it a step further because there's a political game that's also being played.
Okay.
And one of the things that Benjamin Netanyahu has been able to aptly demonstrate is that he is capable of masterfully, and I am using the term, masterfully navigate through the political nonsense. He's very, very good. The biggest mistake that Netanyahu's enemies have made from the very beginning within Israeli politics is they have underestimated the capacity that he has to not only not give up, but they have underestimated the political prowess that he has in maneuvering through the many problems that have been put in front of him. He will not give up. He will not end. He will not stop. And many people, many people are associating him with the type of mind that Ben-Gurion had. He is, in many ways, he has become a very, very unstoppable political force. And the mind that he has within his navigation of the political arena is in essence second to none. And I actually, when people call him Churchillian, I actually think that they're actually cutting him short. I think there's an aspect about him that, or a level to his sophistication that even Churchill goes unmatched with.
Well, you know why they're doing that.
Well, of course.
No.
Because they're wanting to make the moral equivalency argument with respect to what Churchill did in World War II. There's a discussion there.
James, you're missing the main point. They both love cigars.
Well, that's Churchill showed it much more publicly. Bibi doesn't.
Bibi wait a minute. He got in trouble for his cigars. I don't know if you know.
He's got this weird thing about him now. Well, not as bad as Bill Clinton's love for cigars. That's a whole different. That's a whole different story. But here's my point behind this. It's funny. But I think some people in this audience are laughing.
Are we going to get trouble?
Not on the Clinton cigar thing, but on the Bibi cigar thing. Like, David is so dang quick-witted. It's not even funny. He's just, it's so, I mean, how you think of stuff like this is amazing. But my point behind this is there's something about his political prowess that is remarkable. And I think that his awareness of let me say this way. His ability to be able to read the room, not just in Israel, but also in the United States of America, is in many ways second to none. And I don't think that people give him enough credit for how he can masterfully move through the political spectrum and understand what's actually happening. And I can tell you, part of what we perceive as the delays in what are going on is multifaceted. The first aspect of this multifaceted complexity that we continue to discuss centers around the idea that there are some very calculated, scripted things that are happening with respect to intelligence operations that give them unique positions of advantage that are being worked out first. A great example of this is Operation Grim Beeper, many of these other types of operations that are happening. That's number one. Number two, because there's a functional dismantling that's happening right now that the Arab world that stands at enemies with Israel is scared to death of right now. Iran is scared out of its mind. Turkey is scared out of its mind. By the way, this is really interesting to me. For a country that's moderately influenced by Islamic Brotherhood, Turkey, you would think, specifically Erdogan, you would think for 1 second that Erdogan would be scared to death of Iran. Yet he seems to be literally wanting to sleep in bed with them, knowing fully that the Ottoman Empire stands to be destroyed by the Persians if they get their way. But that's beside the point. I don't even want to get into that side note. The one thing that I do want to say that I think is really important here is that Netanyahu recognizes the power that he has in the slow roll. So he is dismantling some things right now that is taking away the kind of confidence that Iran has, to the point where Iran is going to be backed in a corner where they're going to behave irrationally. And they've already been doing it. But the bigger issue here, the one that's even more significant, and even more significant than what he's doing in his own Knesset, is how he is learning to take advantage of and manipulate the current political condition in the United States of America. He's smart.
No, he is. And again, he is using the American political situation that he has been handed out in a very smart way. For instance, everybody's talking about the THAAD that's coming in.
Yep.
And
you want to explain to people what that is?
Well, I don't remember the designation.
I'll look
high
it up.
altitude, something high altitude intercept. But basically, it is a missile interception system that is actually built to intercept ballistic missiles in the atmosphere. Now, wait a minute. Outside of the atmosphere, excuse me. And so you say, wait a minute, isn't that what the Arrow 2 and the Arrow 3 do? Yes, that is true. But this is an American system. And what basically is happening is that the American administration has agreed to send these mobile units to Israel. Now, it's going to take a while till they get here. But why do we need those mobile units here?
By the way, just really quickly, if Mike Digman would probably know what that stands for, because when we say THAAD, it's THAAD, and I don't remember what it was. I remember when we first started reading about it, there was a person who was a JPL scientist that was going to our church that had talked to us about it. Not JPL, it was not JPL. The other one. Anyway, I'll remember in a second. But it was a big deal.
So we're talking about a missile system that intercepts ballistic missiles outside of the atmosphere.
By the way, so sophisticated, I believe there's only like seven of those batteries in the world.
So America is sending one. Now, this is the first time America is actually sending American boots onto Israeli soil. Yep. That's a new one. Now, why is that happening now?
Oh, we got it. Thermal high altitude area defense. That's what it is. Thank you, Dale.
There you go. So why is Israel? Why is the United States agreeing to send actual American units? Because it's coming as a unit. Why is Israel agreeing to this? Why is that happening now? And I think that's part of a bigger play that Benjamin Netanyahu is playing. I think he needed them for some reason because we've requested and the American has said yes. I think he's paying a price for the fact that they're coming in. By the way, not only that, the rumors are talking about the fact that Israel is lacking interceptors for the Iron Dome system.
Yeah, this is also an interesting conversation. I don't think I've actually talked to you about this, but Elon Musk has been spending a lot of time communicating with Israel.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, to the point where the United States of America may very well be getting aggressive with Elon Musk to their own detriment over this. The one thing that I do think is interesting is I'd be willing to bet you that Elon's technology is somehow, some way, in one way or another, being used to help Israel right now.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And the reason why I believe that is because I think he sees the threat of Iran, And I think that Elon lately has been operating on a level of very personal action. And what's been driving him right now is his desire to destroy the transgender woke nonsense that's been going on. And he has developed a very, very deep rooted, well, don't underestimate him. And but there's a very deep level, a very deep rooted level of love and attachment that he's developed towards Trump, to the point right now where he's taking Iran's threats very personally.
What can Elon give Israel? And I'm asking a rhetorical. Wait a minute. What do you think Elon can give Israel? What does he have that Israel needs?
Perhaps the most significant thing that he has that Israel needs is the last remaining corners that exist within intelligence gathering through assets that Elon has in space. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about military application. I'm not talking about cell phones. I'm talking about military application.
We both agree.
We think the same way.
We both agree that the main tool that Elon has that he could offer Israel to be an advantage
has already offered Israel.
Well, probably is those satellites that he's got surrounding the world, which in case of if you want to use, for instance, GPS guided munitions, but you know that the GPS can be turned off by the United States. Boom. I'm just giving one weird how do you say connection that could be made out of this.
And there are some aspects of this that are going to backfire on some of these corrupt lawmakers, because some of these corrupt lawmakers opened up a few doors for guys like Elon to work with people like Ukraine in order to provide some technology that helps them be able to fight Russia. And Elon basically said, well, I'm not doing it, but he still has the backing of the laws that have been put into place to give him the flexibility to be able to do what he does as a defense contractor.
Okay, so let's go back to where we're
hate
talking.
him, by the way.
Let's go back to where we're talking. And one of the questions I really need to ask you, and again, this is me as an Israeli asking somebody who has a mindset into the Arab mind.
Yeah.
Okay? Because one of the things that's been getting on my soul lately, and I don't know if Christy's listening to us, but I think that's part of the issue, is this. The end game. What I'm seeing as an Israeli, I'm looking out at these enemies that are willing to spend their last dime. The Houthis, I mean, my God.
Yep.
They're living in sandals in the dust with no food, and they're buying up with the last couple of dollars they have these long-range missiles to pinprick Israel. And I'm seeing this hatred, and I'm saying, wait a minute, what can we do to change this situation? I mean, if we destroy them, will that Gaza's been decimated. I mean, in this, but the hatred is still there. Hezbollah, what do we have with Lebanon? Why is Lebanon
only one
alive?
solution to this.
Let me get up. And I'm saying to myself, I'm looking around, and even Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, who have a positive disposition with Israel for political, economic, regional, military intelligence reasons, the people in Jordan hate Israelis. The people in Saudi Arabia hate Israelis.
That's regional, by the way.
Okay, so
that's a very regional thing, because the growing pop culture sentiment, not only in Saudi Arabia but in Jordan, has actually, I wouldn't call it a love for Israel, but certainly has a level of respect for Israel that very few people have.
Okay, maybe to illustrate what I'm trying to get to here, let's see if I can kind of put it together. The story with Lebanon.
Yep.
Okay, listen, I was in Lebanon in 81, 82, 83. I was 3 years in Lebanon, trying to make Lebanon a place that is not dangerous to Israel. Okay, that's what he did. We went into the Lebanese war. I killed a lot of people, mostly Syrians that came in from the other side. We pushed the PLO that was using Lebanon as a base to attack. And again, the PLO was saying, wait a minute, we're not Lebanese. We tried to put a pro-Israel or acceptance of Israel administration in there. We created a Southern Lebanon army. I don't know if you remember. That was going to be all of that. We put that in place. Everything was there. But the hatred of Israel overcame all of that?
It's because there's a big mistake that Israel made in this.
Again, I'm trying to go this. So wait a minute. Now we're back at this thing, and what do? We can go back into Lebanon. We can conquer Lebanon. Well, then what do? We have to stay there for another 20 years. What is going to need to happen for the Arab world? And I don't mean just the administration, but the Arabs living in the Middle East, or in an extension, the Muslims, to say, wait a minute, we don't want to destroy Israel anymore.
Okay, couple of facts.
Yes. And I'm trying to go up. I'm not only talking the geopolitics. What in the mindset puts the hatred of Israel in the Arab mind so strong? By the way, in extension to that, a lot of hatred for Israel and the rest of the world that we're seeing more and more of. How does that change? And is it even possible to change?
It's a generational reflexive mechanism is what it is. And that's the problem. And
say that again. I like the word.
It's a
generational
reflexive mechanism.
I need to buy that word.
So let me explain what I mean when I say that, okay? If maybe the best way to do this in popular culture that most people in our audience will understand, you'll probably understand this, Hatfield McCoy. Okay? Generational reflexive mechanism is a phrase that I have made up, okay, that I'm coining.
I like it.
To demonstrate the fact that the reflexive action that you see amongst generation after generation has created a mechanism of hatred and destruction because that's always what has existed. So the idea here, and perhaps it starts with me stating what the solution is. Sorry, I have to do this really quickly. Sorry, guys. I don't like doing this.
Ready? Boom.
Okay, so this is what has to happen, okay? If you're going to solve the problem, and this is a very serious issue, you have to do the ugly first. You have to go in, you have to remove the element that's creating a majority of the problem, number one, okay? And after that's done, after you remove that problem, you have to create conditions that are pleasant, healthy, and beneficial enough in order for the next generation to be able to experience a taste of the better life, thus recognizing the benefit of the interaction that takes place in a safer, better, healthier, more comfortable environment. Now, with that said, let me just explain why that works. Let me explain why that could actually work. The reason why that could actually work is for this reason and this reason only. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. It's not the biggest. Christianity is. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. Now, you might look at me puzzled and say, well, James, that can't be your reason for saying what you're saying, because if Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, it is the fundamentalist idea of Islam that's predicated upon the desire to want to destroy Israel. We know that. Yeah. If you're an Islamic fundamentalist, you believe that one of the ways you can bring honor and glory to Allah is the destruction of the Jewish state. So, James, if you say that, then how in the world do you use Islam being the fastest growing religion in the world as a tool to demonstrate your point? That next generations can see this. I'll tell you how. We know this. It's a fact. It's not disputed. We have the tools. The statisticians know how to use the numbers. We have the data. It's not even a question. It's an indisputable fact. The reason why Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world has nothing to do with Islam's conversion rate. As a matter of fact, Islam, that's right. You said it. Islam's conversion rate is actually far behind its birth rate, number one. But the Islamic conversion rate is actually slowing down behind the conversion rate of Christianity from Islam. So in other words, the amount of people that are converting to Islam is actually a smaller number than the amount of people converting away from Islam into Christianity. Now, with all of that said, let me explain why. I think that's a big deal. The belief and the growth of Islam, which becomes the predication for the destruction of the Jewish state, has the ability for the next generation to not buy into the lie of Islam is greater than it ever has been before. Because in the past, the growth of Islam at a rapid rate has always been fundamentally based on the idea that the availability of knowledge to that growing population has always not been there. Now,
There's
it's completely different. Matter of fact, let me just simply say this. 18% of the Muslim world, 18%, only 18%, speaks or reads Arabic. Speaks or reads Arabic.
That's interesting.
So if you think about that for just a second, that means 82% of the Islamic world doesn't even speak Arabic. And the greatest scholars in Islam right now, albeit many of them speak Arabic, they kind of have to, are all beginning to identify the problem of the fact that they have no original manuscripts that date back to the time of Muhammad's life. He died in the early portion of the 7th century. And lots of people are saying, we don't even have any viable manuscripts until we get to the time of the Ottoman Empire, right around 1300. Literally, the 13th century, the 12th century, 13th century. No, sorry, 14th century.
Okay,
the 14th century.
Islam has a fundamental, how do you say, core issue right now.
Yeah, so with that said, let me just explain where that goes. If you have the absence of a deeply rooted intellectual argument that sustains the viability of the truth represented by Islam, which you do,
okay,
if you have that problem, then the bigger issue at hand is, how do you distract people away from it? This goes back to the conversation we're having about Saudi Arabia and Mecca.
Classic.
It's a very, very interesting. And by the way, we're living in a world today where amongst the younger generation, taqiyya is not enough. Deception is not enough.
Okay, so classic example that in order to distract my population from an internal problem, I create an external problem.
100%.
And we're seeing, and that is what Iran is doing as much as anything else. And not only Iran, I'm going to say Iran as representative of the whole Arab world today. By the way, one of the interesting things, Iran is not Arab. They don't speak Arabic.
No, they're Persian.
So here's the thing. They are trying to distract the fundamental, how do you say, bankruptcy of the Muslim world with actually creating an outside enemy that they will use to threaten the Muslim world that we need to unify around.
But this becomes the diversionary tactic that we're talking about, which is why I say that understanding the solution helps you to be able to better understand what drives this. And the solution to this problem is, in essence, and this is going to sound crazy, is going to be to force your position within the intended environment that you need change and allow the effects of that forced position to change the mind of the observers from the future generations.
Okay.
By the way, this worked in Saudi Arabia.
Hold this thought here a minute, and I'm going to say this. What I'm trying to reach here is something that I've been dealing with and trying to find a way to explain. Why do they hate us so much?
Well, there's several reasons for that.
Yeah, okay. But here's part of what I'm saying. And again, people are saying, wait a minute, the problem between Israel and Hezbollah is Lebanon. No, it's not Lebanon. The problem is Israel Hezbollah is because Hezbollah is being used by Iran. Okay, so what's the problem between Israel and Iran? Why does Iran hate Israel so much? We don't have a border. We don't have interest. We're not threatening their oil. We're not threatening their waterways. What is the problem? They need Israel to be the enemy and a representative of the West, but the enemy that they can attract all of their energies to and not deal with the internal bankruptcy is going in.
There's two major reasons, and the reasons are obvious. It's not even puzzling, right? Let's first of all, before I get into the two reasons, let's both acknowledge that this is spiritual. Let's assume that, okay?
Amen.
We already know, okay? But the major of the reasons goes back to Iran's character and Iran's history. So let me back up to the less of the two reasons. The less of the two reasons are you have Khomeini, he comes in, he rules through fear, intimidation. Khomeini's view becomes the view of society because society ends up adapting to or holding fast to the general skeleton of their political environment, not necessarily the cultural environment, because a lot of Persians love Jews. Matter of fact, a lot of Persians that live in Iran right now, believe it or not, if they had their choice, would have Jewish life as a part of their culture. Okay. And that's a different story, okay? But the second issue, and this is the issue that is the primary. This is the one This is the reason that stands fast to any other thing that you can think of. And this is true, and this relates all the way back to the existence of the Medo-Persian Empire. This goes back to the days of Nebuchadnezzar. This goes back to the transition between Balthazar, Esther. This speaks volumes of the character of the Medo-Persian Empire. Think of it like this. This is super critical to understand this. Through the days of even the Medo-Persian Empire, their view with respect to what drove their philosophy of life, their religion, their ideals, always was different from the rest of the environment around them, the rest of the neighborhood. Within the context...
Let me put a parenthesis. He says Medo-Persian Empire. You need to understand that the world that we live in the West is a result of Greco-Roman civilization overcoming the Medo-Persian Empire.
That's right, 100%.
When you watch the movie 300 or you watch the stories of the Spartans, and we are a result of the Greek that have overcome the Persians. Alexander the Great...
The Medo-Persians is what I would say.
The Medo-Persians, yes. Okay. Most of us see them as great. But Alexander the Great fought a major battle, and there was a major war between the Medo-Persian mindset, philosophy, religion on one side, and the Greco-Roman mindset, philosophy, and religion on the other side. That great conflict resulted in Western civilization as we know it today because the West, meaning Europe, meaning the Greeks and Romans, won over the Medo-Persians.
And I want to explain something. The Persians learned a lot from that. And so the Medes, the influence of the Medes upon the Persian Empire and the change that resulted during the time of the post-exilic period, okay? I'm talking specifically around the time of Artaxerxes Longimanus in 445, like in that region.
Okay.
Some of the changes that happened with the Medo-Persian Empire taught them a lot about how to deal with their adversaries in their neighborhood. And one of the things that the Persians learned very, very early on is that we initiate acts of aggression based on the function of a proxy relationship instead of a unilateral and very direct approach. We've never had a hard time recognizing that with Iran when it comes to their military infrastructure. But the one area that we fail to recognize with Iran, which is why so many people say, why in the world would Iran hate us? Why? We hear that a lot. You did a video on this recently, actually a very good video. Yeah. But the point is this. The reason why so many people are puzzled by it is because they recognize the military strategy, but they don't understand the core of the mindset change and the heart that drives the military strategy. Can I give you a great example of this? Let me show you. 95% of the Islamic world right now, actually, I would probably say close to, just 95% is of the Sunni Islamic world. 95% Sunni.
I'm going to call it a denomination the way I like
it. They have some fundamental differences, but yes, we'll just call it, I'll use the word flavor.
Well,
the Sunni flavor.
It's deeper than the divide between Catholic and Protestant.
Oh, 100%. 100%. But I will tell you this. 95% of the Islamic world is Sunni. Roughly 3% of the Islamic world, yes, that means there's a 2% outlier. 3% of the Islamic world is Shiite. An overwhelming majority of the Shiite population isn't going to be in Azerbaijan. It's not going to be in in areas that we would typically regard as, outliers in Magog. It's actually the Persian Empire. Now, with that said, here's the thing that people don't recognize. The Persian Empire knows, Iran knows, that there is no way that the functional unraveling of the plan of Allah in the last days can happen unless there is a deception of mechanism or a deception of deception that is actually deployed. You have to be deceiving. Now, this is why I bring this up. If Iran learned anything from what happened with the Greeks, and if Iran learned anything from what happened with the Romans, and if Iran learned anything from what happened with the Ottoman Empire, And if Iran learned anything from what has happened all throughout the tenure of history,
by the way, the colonial
post-Christ, the colonial period.
The colonial period.
Of course, the colonial period.
Post-Ottoman period,
Heck yeah.
Iran was completely sidelined in everything that was going on.
If they learned anything from any of those things, then they recognized one extremely valuable principle, and to this day, they have become the best at applying it. And that's this. I know that if I can take advantage of the hatred that exists within my enemies can become my friends. And the greatest conduit that I can have in the Islamic world to create friends amongst my enemies is going to be the Jews. Because the Jews do not stand on any end of the denominational front, as you would call it.
Okay.
They are not Islamic. They are the worshipers of the one person that the Muslims give the greatest level of disrespect to. And that is the descendant of Isaac. So if they are the descendants of Isaac, and we know that everybody else is a descendant of Ishmael, then the only way Iran knows they can put into effect this level of success for their ultimate goal, which is in essence derived from Islamic fundamentalism, then they have to use deception in order to create an alliance to produce the destruction of the Jewish state, knowing full well that the core beneficiary that erects from it becomes Iran. This was, by the way, working for Iran. This was working very well for
By the
Iran.
way, it still is.
No, well, let me tell you.
I think
I'm going to make an argument that it isn't, and I'm going to tell you why.
Well, I'm okay. I want to
because I don't want to derail the argument here. I just want to bring this up, and then I'll let you say. Well, you can say whatever you want. I don't have to let you do anything. But my point is this. My point is that Iran is catching on to the fact that this is failing. It worked very well. It worked from 1979 all the way up to, I would argue, up until about 2020. I would argue maybe a little bit before that. And the reason why it worked so well is because there was never a pathway that Saudi Arabia or any of the prominent Sunni nations ever saw to develop a mechanism of economic independence without the ability to be able to separate the function of what exists between these conflicting nations. When Donald Trump came in and sat down and had a meeting with all of the enemies of Iran and said, you might not like us, you might not like our culture, you might not like this, you might not like that, but we all have a common enemy and you know it. And I know I'm not allowed to say this as a world leader, but I'm telling you, we have a common enemy. So let's develop a tool by which we start normalizing with Israel. And as a result, I will guarantee you the gap in security that you've always had so that you can be able to go in a different direction. By the way, when that happened, MBS saw his opportunity. He saw his opportunity to walk away from the greatest status that they could find economically, being in the G20, and to start his path towards the G7. And that's why you're seeing what you're seeing right now. And this is exactly why Saudi Arabia has actually made it illegal. It is illegal in Saudi Arabia right now to protest against Israel, and more specifically to do a pro-Palestine
but why is it
protest.
Illegal? So here's what I'm trying to do.
Oh, that's Islamic Brotherhood. That's the main.
No, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to figure out why a young man growing up in Cairo, or a young man growing up in Baghdad, or a young Muslim growing up in Tehran, if you want it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Sees Israel as such a threat.
But that's my point. My point is it's the generation.
Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the thing. The other thing is, though, if I know anything, and since I've grown up, let's say I'm 30 years old, since I've grown up, I've seen Saddam Hussein stand up to the world and get smacked. I've seen the Taliban and Osama bin Laden stand up to the world and get smacked. I've seen Iraq, Iran, whatever, try to stand up to the world and get smacked. Everything Muslim that stands up to the Western world as of now has been smacked down.
Well, yes and no. What you watched Afghanistan, for example. You mentioned Afghanistan. You watched Afghanistan stand up And they didn't get smacked initially. As a matter of fact, they dropped their pants and peed all over Russia. And they did it well.
And again, this is me, the young Arab, saying, "Wow, wonderful." I mean, the Taliban. I mean, I'm going to hold my hat up to them. But in the end, they did not. I mean,
yeah, but you have to keep in mind, it's what they did that got them smacked. It's them coming against the machine that the United States of America has created for the warmongering mechanism that they pushed against that got them smacked.
Yeah, but do you remember the support that Saddam Hussein had in the Muslim world? He was gassing his own people.
Bro.
They saw him as a great. I mean, do you remember the support Nasser had in the Muslim world?
Abdel Nasser was that's a whole other story.
Okay, so these are like the great how do you say, Muslim heroes of old.
Yep.
Okay, that are going to stand up, take on the world, and they keep on getting smashed. And I think, and again, I might be wrong, as a young Muslim growing up we're in the Muslim world, thinking I have the best religion, I have the best people. I mean, why am I not ruling the world? There has to be a reason. There has to be an excuse for me not ruling the world.
Because the American mentality thus so far has prevented the mindset of taking over or getting involved for the necessity or the betterment of us as a country and the world around. Israel has a different mindset.
Yeah.
The United States of America is, in essence, has become in many ways, I'm not going to say the modern day colonizers because that's not a fair characterization, but the United States of America has become a very popular war machine, and it's grown. We put ourselves in places where we don't belong.
Oh, definitely the United States of America
we're the king of that.
Is the world's policeman right now.
And by the way, to our detriment, that's happened.
Okay.
So Israel doesn't operate that way.
So here's the thing. But this is gang warfare, and this is a gang neighborhood. And the young person who has grown up in fear of the police all his life, okay, now sees a gangster guy who's standing up to the police. And he gets all excited about that. By definition, he says, this is what I want. I want to be a part of that. I mean, you always ask yourself, why do people join gangs?
Yep.
Because it gives them a sense of, I'm overcoming the man.
Yep.
Okay. And I think the Muslim world and the support that Iran is getting, okay.
But again, this is all tied to Islam.
Okay.
This is Islam. This is Islamic
so Islam is
fundamentalism.
having this problem. And here's the thing. I think that the moderate Muslims have realized that that is a problem and have moved away from this. On the other hand, Iran is becoming the gang. Okay, becoming the gang. Now, here's the issue, all right? If you are a bigger gang in Mexico, you will support the local neighborhood gang, okay, to disrupt and destabilize the police force in the neighborhood because that allows you.
That's
so
correct.
Here's the thing. I think Iran is even being used now, listen to this, by China.
Oh yeah, I mean that's not even a question. There's not even that's not even up for debate. It's very, very obvious that they're being used by China. And as a matter of fact, what's really interesting is here's the thing that's really interesting. I don't think China is significant in Bible prophecy. I think China, again, when you call China the kings of the East, you make the same mistake that everybody makes when they actually say the West Bank. Okay, because you say the East based on other nations, you don't say East based on Israel.
Yeah.
Okay. When you say the West Bank, you're using Jordan as the reference point. Right.
Okay.
That's why we say Judea Samaria. So I think that China, based on that understanding, I see the writing on the wall. China is getting desperate because China's economy is failing. That's actually why COVID became what COVID became. It was an act of desperation by the Chinese. And the one thing that we have to understand with respect to everything that happened with how that took place is when you stop to look at China's energy problem, you look at China's technology problem, you look at China's relations problem, there's a reason why the Biden administration or the handlers of Joe Biden, let's just say Joe Biden's handlers, did not remove the tariffs that Trump put on China.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that.
Okay, and again, I see China seeing itself moving towards a massive blowout with the West. first island chain, Taiwan, do whatever you want. They're pushing that. And one of the main aspects is China is going to use Iran in the Middle East the way Iran is using Hezbollah in Lebanon.
100%. And by the way, you know where you see the biggest manifestation of this right now with China and Iran? Take some time to study the issue of the South China Sea and look at what's going on between China and the Philippines, and you will understand the connection between China and Iran. It will make perfect sense.
Search on Google the 9-dash line. I mean, that's amazing.
Right. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And when, by the way, when you do search that, when you go and you do that search, please do me a favor so you don't become a part of the group of ignorant people that don't know their heads from their rears. Please read the international court documents that came up with these guidelines, not guidelines, we came up with the law that China continues to violate. Read the case law.
But here's the thing. I think we've lost at least part of them. Let me see if I want. I want this to be a clear picture. Iran is using Hezbollah in Lebanon in order to destabilize the situation on Israel's northern border, in order for us not to have to deal with them directly.
That's right.
Okay? Get that idea. That's what a proxy is. China is using Iran and the Middle East and the way to destabilize the Middle East, to make the United States of America commit resources to what's going into the Middle East in order to make it easier for them in their struggle in the South China Sea.
It's a laundering operation.
Okay.
That's very good. Yeah, that's a good description.
And you see these two correlations between the two of them. You have to understand how this is working. Now, watch what Israel is doing. Israel has gone in and smacked the Hezbollah, which means maybe the Lebanese, and that's what Israel's talking about now, will decide we don't want the Hezbollah anymore here. It'll be better for us if the Americans put money into the Lebanese army and the border with Israel becomes quiet. It'll make our lives as Lebanese better. Maybe, the Middle East on the whole is going to say, we don't want Iran messing up in this because they are costing us, they're making our lives worse. And this is what MBS is saying. This is what the Gulf states are saying. It is costing us, it's making our life worse. Let's move the influence of Iran out in order for us to have a better life here. And China is going to lose its proxy, for lack of a better word, the way Hezbollah is a proxy for Iran. The whole Iran is a proxy for China in its war against the United States. Now, my question is this. If Iran does go down, what made Iran attack Israel directly? Until we were fighting and losing against Hezbollah, they didn't attack us directly. The minute we're about to take Hezbollah off the map, then they decided to make a direct attack. What I'm worried is that Israel does take Iran off the map, Israel and the United States, we're going to turn up the fire for a more direct conflict with China.
Yeah, and there is some reality. There's some wisdom to that.
We tied all of that in a very weird way.
No, there's some wisdom to that. And perhaps the only reason why I say it won't be as cut and dry as that is because of one country that will forever make it very difficult for that to happen, and that's Japan. And there's a lot to do with that issue. It's a big thing.
Japan is arming itself big time
Oh
right
my
now.
goodness. In ways that, by the way, the rest of the international community, it's almost like they don't care. It's almost like, here you go, here it is. And if you think the strength of the imperial forces during World War II were significant, wait until you see what Japan is doing right now. Now, mind you, Japan has every reason to do what they're doing. And without, there's nothing you can say about why they're doing what they're doing, but they're the ones that are silently in the background stealing everything. I don't want to use the word stealing, but I'm giving that illustration of like the guy who's in the background taking things while everybody else is arguing. It would be like me and you getting into a big old debate while our cars are on. We're standing in the middle of the street and some guy gets in there and steals our cars and we don't even know because we're so busy fighting.
Yeah. So again, Japan is very happy with what's going on, but Japan has started to arm itself big time, and there's even kind of rumors of Japan putting together nuclear capability, and that is weird in its sense. So let's come back down to what's going on right now. we're on this. It's either going to go, Iran wins the Middle East, and Israel is going to be a forgotten enclave in that, or this whole "we are the greatest" is going to crumble, and the whole Iranian hegemony is going to disintegrate, and Israel is going to connect to Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states,
which is a distinct possibility.
which is why we need to smack Iran down right now. Until we do that, we're not going to get to that situation.
Again, the reason why I am very confident in the fact that Iran will become an insignificant part of the picture, at least in the immediate time, is because Israel cannot obtain what it needs to obtain with Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Arab Gulf nations if they do not figure out a way to tame Iran's mindset, especially in the insertion of the land bridge that they need to create their new trade route. Now, by the way, the only way that can happen, this is in my opinion, and I actually call it fact because I know what the Bible says. The only way that this can happen is by bringing in Russia to be the great circus actor. Russia has to be the trainer. Russia has to be the tamer. That's what Russia has to do. So Russia has to come in and basically hold Iran at bay under the auspice that there is a greater purpose involved in the for lack of a better term, in the restraining. And then we will see an Ezekiel 38 scenario taking place years down the line.
So here's my question, and maybe I'm trying to reach this part of the story, and that is this. Why is the Biden administration holding Israel back right now?
Well, the Biden administration is holding, it's a purely political move, but you also have to keep this in mind. The Biden administration is characterized by blatant demonic interaction. They're wicked people. So wicked people are going to stand with wickedness, and they're going to oppose righteousness. And if anything even reminds them of righteousness, they're coming after it. Listen, they want to make it illegal to pray at an abortion clinic.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what's going on. But right now, in the current moment, let's throw away the big philosophical question, and let's just hone down to the current moment. Let's just zoom down to the current moment. It's a purely political play. They do not want to see greater conflict in the Middle East because greater conflict in the Middle East, greater conflict in the Middle East will provide the level of economic instability that will create desperation in America to want to get rid of the current administration. And that's a big deal.
So if I understand correctly, the best thing for President Trump to get reelected is for Israel to hit Iran right now.
Yeah.
Massively hit Iran.
I think so.
And
I think that's going to happen.
The resulting blowout of that, basically is
the momentary instability that creates will be more than enough for them to want to bring Trump into
will tilt the elections.
That's right.
And that's what Biden is afraid of. So that's why this administration is using everything in its power to hold Israel back.
Yeah, and I want to be careful because words matter, right? It's not what Biden is afraid of. It's actually what his handlers are afraid of. Biden is so dang angry at Kamala that he's already going out of his way to sabotage her.
Yeah.
He's already said it. He came out, made a statement, said, the last few years, Kamala's been making all the decisions.
Yeah, but I mean, again, is not seriously as we took him before. We're taking him
that's right. No, that's right.
Okay,
but he is making a mess out of things for them.
So, but I'm going to say this: the handlers are telling Bibi, lower it, keep it down, because you're threatening our election.
Right.
And I think, again, this is, and the question is Bibi going to listen to them and accept it?
Yep.
And say, okay, I'm going to do what I want to do and blow up Isfahan, for instance.
Yeah, no, that's right.
If he does that, then he has a Trump election made, I'm saying. Now, why am I not surprised that it is Israel, again, being the decisive factor in the political system of the strongest military power in the world?
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. By the way, I do want to say this, and I'm not going to mention any names here because I don't want to take, I may be taking a comment out of context, but there is somebody who actually says that you forget, something to the effect of you forget that Ezekiel 38 was the Syrian conflict. Okay, so I just want to say this because this is really, really important. Okay, I dare anybody who would believe that nonsense, that Ezekiel 38 is the Syrian conflict. I dare anybody to show me where in Ezekiel 38 Syria is even mentioned. Show me where Syria is even mentioned in Ezekiel 38.
Yeah.
Other than these forces may be going through Syria to come to Israel. I just have to say that because look, these comments get thrown out. Oh, no. But I think it's important to not that I want to take a diversion. I don't want to take a diversion, but I do want to simply say that there are a very, 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 there's a very, very important aspect to this that we have to recognize, and that is our geopolitical persuasion concerning the current day that we're in has to be heavily influenced by our understanding of Bible prophecy. Because if it isn't, then we're not going to understand where things are skewing or where things are going, and then our approach to why things are happening the way they're happening completely changes because we're looking at it from the place of reasoning. I'll give you a great example of this.
Okay.
When me and you used to sit down and argue, whether it be here over a burger or in Israel over whatever, the one thing that you were missing was the fact that you weren't born again. Now that you're born again and you're an avid student of the Word of God, by the way, I just have to say this. Not only are you a brilliant Bible teacher, like, bro, when you shared for me on Thursday when I was gone, I could have done without the last 5 minutes because you just made me cry like a little girl. But wow, like, bro, God has opened up your heart and your mind to apply all the years of history that he's given you to the Word. Like, you know the Word well. Like, I'm very proud of you. But that's the thing that changes.
I don't think I know it well enough. But
no one, I mean, anybody that knows the word worth a dime is always going to say you don't know it well enough, because I don't know it well enough. I definitely don't know it well enough. But my point is this. My point is when you know the word heavily influences all of those things.
Which is why I don't know how much time we have, but I do want to bring up the Columbus issue. Because
let's talk about Columbus. Let's close on the Columbus.
That's kind of amazing.
Let's do that. Yeah, because Saudi Arabia, we covered it plenty in the little auxiliaries of our conversation.
Okay.
But you guys have got to listen to this. The Columbus thing it's kind of anyway. Go ahead, bro.
He was a Jew.
Of course.
What do you mean, of course? I mean, who thought he was? I mean, he was one of us.
Yes.
I mean,
To me, that's been common knowledge for God knows how long.
No, we weren't sure. But now I think most of us are sure. And I'm going to say even this. Most of the crew on Nina, Pinto, and Santa Maria, they were all conversos. Conversos is, okay, and here's the dynamic of this, okay? And the way, I don't remember what year Columbus sailed, but I know that
1492.
I say to an American, Columbus sailed at, and everybody knows when Columbus sailed.
Yeah.
That's the same year that Isabel and Fernando outlawed Judaism.
Yes, that's right. And that's actually what drove that.
Literally outlawed Judaism.
That's right.
Meaning the greatest, one of the greatest empires in Europe at the time, okay, the king and queen, after they have, listen to this, they have just now finished in the Reconquista. They have just now finished driving Islam out of Spain. The first thing that they do is outlaw Judaism. That, again, those are connections that like Tom says, you can't make this up. So European Christianity, Catholicism at this point, manages to drive Spain out politically or militarily, managed to drive Islam out militarily out of Spain. Now Spain and Europe is saved from the Islamic conquest because that was the highest point of the Islamic conquest. What's the next thing they do? They outlaw Judaism.
And then let's not get started on the Crusades.
Wait a minute, the Crusades are way before. What I'm trying to say reaches this. They outlaw Judaism, and as a result, Judaism spreads out from Spain. Anybody has ever heard this term Sephardic Jews? These are the Jews that actually were banished out of Spain. They spread out to the rest of the Middle East, the Maghreb, Libya, and Morocco and Tunisia get a big influx. By the way, the Ottoman Empire gets a massive kind of influx of this. But what I'm trying to say is this. That's the catalyst that opened up the New World.
100%.
And God is using the hatred of the Jews in order to push his plan forward. And let's put it like this. The New World, the spread of Christianity to the New World actually resulted down the historical line with a Christian dynamic in South America and a Christian dynamic in North America that is the basis for Western civilization and Western Christianity as we know it today, that has saved the world twice, and it looks like might be saving the world a third time.
Okay, so let's have some fun.
Whoa,
It's powerful. I'm going to add to this because this is really powerful. You have a Hebrew Bible in your phone?
Yep.
Okay, go to your Hebrew Bible, and I want you to read out loud Genesis chapter 12, and I want you to read out loud specifically verse 3. I hope we have some people in our audience that understand Hebrew. But there's one key phrase that the English translation does not do justice with. And I want you to read it, and you'll see the lights probably have already turned on for you on this one. But I want everybody to keep in mind everything David just said in the last minute and a half. Okay, with Columbus and everything. Read Genesis 12 and then read verse 3 for me.
We're going to have to do this. Sorry, you guys.
That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Just read verse 3.
So we're on Genesis 12.
Verse 3, and read in your microphone if you can.
Okay.
Verse 3.
ואברך מברכך ומקללך האר ונברחו בך כל משפחות האדמה. The key word is bracha.
Bless.
Baraka.
Yep.
Bracha.
Now here's the thing that's really interesting. You say it's the key word because it's used in several different ways in that verse.
Yep.
Another key word, or a couple of key words, or key phrases that I would say is the phrase that ties all of the families of the world. Of the world. Read it.
ונתברכו בך. Blessed in you, כל משפחות האדמה. All the families of the world.
Like, I can't begin to I cannot translate into English. David will agree with me how significant of a phrase that is when read in the original language. Because basically that's God making a promise to saying that in essence, the whole world will benefit from the existence of the Jewish population.
So,
I mean, like what you just said about Christopher Columbus. I mean, what an example.
How the opening up of the New World had to be a result of Jewish blessing.
The Jews suffer, and that suffering causes them to go somewhere else, and we are blessed because of that suffering. How in the world can you not love God? How in the world can you love God and not be grateful for the contribution of Jews?
Okay, and I'm going to bring up two more things here. Again, maybe because of my conversation last week. The first thing is this. How can you not believe that God exists if you see all of this happening? What other explanation is there?
That's right.
Now that I'm kicking my former self in the backside here on that one. Okay? And I'm going to say something else. Okay? Seeing this and understanding this, how can you not believe that God's chosen people are still chosen? And that's connected to the conversation I had last week.
Yep.
Okay? And if all of these blessings come through these people, we have a Columbus Day because anybody in the United States of America, in this part of the world, realizes the significance with all the problems of the fact that Columbus did open up the New World and connect it to the Old World. And now we realize that was instigated by a Jew. And if you realize that, look at what is happening to the Jews. I mean, one of my main issues, if you want to understand why Jews are so important, look at what Satan is doing to the Jews.
Oh my goodness. I mean, look, and a matter of fact, I'm releasing a video on this on Thursday that gives the biblical reason why Jews are being attacked so much. As a matter of fact, on Thursday, I talk about the fact that it's ridiculous that you have to sit down with he's only Calvary Chapel by name, but with the Calvary Chapel pastor to convince a Calvary Chapel pastor that Israel is still God's chosen people.
Yeah.
How like evil. What a dark picture.
Well, again, it's no more evil than, okay, one of the things that I always remember as a kid is that, I thought Moses was a great man and he had power to do amazing things, supernatural things. But then if you go back to Egypt at the time, the sorcerers in Egypt had the power to do supernatural things too.
Oh, yeah.
And we kind of forget that there is another element that is on this. I mean, the blessing and the curse come together. And just for me realizing that, Columbus was a Jew, and what happened, by the way, not only Columbus itself, the whole spread from the old world to the new world was led by a lot of people. It turns out that when you do Ancestry.com and you kind of tend to connect to the population in South America, there's a lot of Jewish blood in that.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of the original Spaniards that conquered South America in a terrible way. Let's make this clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what's happening now? How do you fight that? How does the enemy fight that? By turning Columbus Day into something else.
Yeah, it's Indigenous Peoples Day is what they're calling it. And the premise of them calling it Indigenous Peoples Day, like Golden Bear, that's really funny. Golden Bear's joking about it, but it's actually happening now. They're calling it Indigenous Peoples Day, and they're basically calling Israel, Jews, the original colonizers because of Christopher Columbus.
So we're going to get blamed for this.
Isn't that crazy?
So
like how absolutely insane. Like, I'll give you an example of how like demonic this is. Candace Owens, who like, she's a grifter. Like she just is. I mean, I'm sorry, but I just think
by the
that
way,
she's just a
explain the
deceiver.
term grifter.
A grifter means that in essence, she creates a window of deception in order to pull out of people something that they want. Like, for example, if I'm a grifter, I would come up to you and I would say all kinds of things to allow me to be put in your favor so that I can just take advantage of you or whatever.
Okay.
It's kind of the same thing.
I got you.
But let me just say this. Candace Owens is running around calling Israel the protector of child molesters. Now, the premise for her saying that is she says that Israel has become a haven for child predators because there are child predators that are in Israel that cannot be extradited to other countries for criminal prosecution. And so there's some truth to that in the fact that Israel will not extradite anybody. No Jew. Israel won't extradite any Jew. But what Candace doesn't have the integrity to tell people, because she has no integrity in this area, none, which causes me to doubt her integrity in every other area, is she doesn't have the integrity to say two major important things. Number one, Israel is a nation that is a law-abiding nation. It criminally prosecutes its own with a standard that is higher than most people in a lot of contexts, number one. Number two, and more significantly, the reason why Israel has a policy, a non-extradition policy, is because the history of thousands of years of Jews being extradited into other countries only to be falsely accused, not given fair trials, and oftentimes executed, tortured, punished for things that they did not deserve to be prosecuted for. So if Israel becomes the true homeland of its people, the Jews, then they are going to make a policy that says we won't extradite people. What Candace won't tell anybody is they're harder on child molesters than most people.
No, I'm going to even say more. Okay, and this is part of me.
She's a liar.
Me living on the divide, or me connecting to the divide. One of the things that freaked me out a little bit about being here is that how much more fear and anxiety you have about children being kidnapped here than in Israel.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I have to be careful not to let the kids play in the playground. In Israel, kids run around the neighborhood in the afternoon alone.
Yep.
The fear of kidnapping and children being taken for a child molesting industry kind of thing doesn't exist in Israel. It's not in our culture. We don't have it. So we don't have a fear of it. It doesn't happen the way it happens here. I mean, we have less of that there than you have. And I realize that the fear here is a result. It's a serious anxiety here.
It's 100% true.
You don't let your kids out of your eyes. I mean, you don't, and I don't have it there. We don't have it there. We don't have that culture. I'm not saying we haven't had, child molesters, but again, not on the level that you have here.
There's a point to be brought up about this, and I think the point is a very viable, very valuable point that we have to discuss. And that centers around this discussion of the tool that people use to hate Jews. They say, well, look at how bad the Jews have treated Christians, and then they show these videos of these young kids that are in Jerusalem spitting on everybody. They show that. First of all, what they don't realize, number one, is they don't realize that an overwhelming majority of the Jewish population do not view things that way. An overwhelming majority. As a matter of fact, the small group of people that are doing this are right now, Israel's very, very angry with that group of people because that's a group of people that's ditching the draft and not serving in the military.
On all kinds of different levels.
On a lot of levels, number one. But number two, and I think perhaps more importantly, is these types of feelings don't come out of a vacuum. In other words, there's a context in which this takes place, and the perception of Christianity by most Jews is driven by real and accurate history. I want to play something for everybody. Michael Brown. Do you know who Michael Brown is?
Yeah, I know.
Michael Brown is, I don't agree with him on everything. And matter of fact, a
lot of things I don't agree with.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But he is a Jew.
Okay.
And he has changed his views on a lot of things as of recent.
By the way, quite a few. I don't know, Konstantin Kissing from trigonometry, same thing. Quite a few have gone that way. The way Kaddis has gone that way.
It's just sad. But look at what he says when he starts talking about why some of the Jews do what they do. But it's not a reason to hate them. It's an outlier. You have to understand they have that view of Christians because of the many terrible things that have been done to them in the name of Christianity.
Okay.
So listen to this. This is interesting. I'm going to switch this over, and there's a context behind this. Let me put this out on full screen so that everybody can see this. But this hopefully will make a little bit more sense. Watch this.
Everyone, this is not disputed. Everyone knows this.
Let me get rid of the fast. I always listen to everything in double time, which is
Thank you.
I know it's bad. Okay, here we go.
This was written by him. He said this. Here's the counsel. Here's how you deal with this.
He's quoting Martin Luther. He's quoting Martin Luther here.
Okay.
Okay? Martin Luther, one of the greatest leaders.
Changed the world.
From 400 years ago, 500 years ago. Not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther.
The original.
Of the Reformation, all of that. That's what he's talking about here. He's about to read what Martin Luther published about Jews.
Okay.
Listen to this.
Devilish burden of the Jews. First, set fire to their synagogues or schools. Second, I advise that their house also be razed and destroyed. Instead, they might be lodged under a roof or in a barn like the gypsies. Third, I advise that all their prayer books and Talmudic writings in which such idolatry, lies, cursing, and blasphemy are taught be taken from them. Fourth, I advise that their rabbis be forbidden to teach henceforth on pain of loss in life and limb. Fifth, I advise that safe conduct in the highways be abolished completely for the Jews. Sixth, I advise that usury, charging interest, be prohibited to them, that all cash and treasure of silver and gold be taken from them and put aside for safekeeping. Seventh, I recommend putting a flail, an axe, a hoe, a spade, a distaff, or a spindle into the hands of young, strong Jews and Jewesses and letting them earn their bread in the sweat of their brow. I'm not going to go on reading more, but there were German Lutheran leaders who celebrated Luther's words as the synagogues were set on fire and Jews attacked and beaten and killed November 8th of 1939, Kristallnacht, in many ways the real beginning of the Holocaust. And the next day happened to be Luther's birthday. There were German Lutheran leaders rejoicing and saying the synagogues in Germany are burning on the occasion of Luther's birthday. That's Christianity that many religious Jews and Eastern European Jews know. The Christianity of the pogroms in Russia, where they dreaded Easter Sunday 100 plus years ago, because after Easter Sunday, the enraged crowds would go out into the Jewish communities to kill the Christ
Rape
killers.
and pillage.
As the Catholic scholar Edward Flannery said, the pages of history that Jews have memorized, Christians have torn out of their books. And I've taught at leading seminaries in America and asked them, when you teach Jewish history, when do you teach this? And with embarrassment, they've said, we don't. So I'm not excusing the spitting. I'm saying there's a context to it. There's a history to it. And to not even bring that in and recognize it, and then to characterize as if this is like widespread in Israel, it's give a very, very false impression, and then to be completely insensitive to the, quote, Christian sins, the church sins. And among these church leaders, not just crusaders, but church leaders who engaged in horrific, ugly rhetoric against the Jewish people. So
it's a great point. He makes a powerful point.
You mean, James, I lived it.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up as a Christian in a Jewish environment. Okay? And one of the questions...
We used to have these discussions before you knew the Lord.
One of the questions I've always had to answer is, okay, and kids, we're studying history. We're studying Crusaders. We're studying the Inquisition that was created by the Catholic Church when they banished the Jews. Do you know that the Inquisition, the famous or infamous Christian organization that tortured people in on the rack and did terrible things in the name of Christianity, was created to figure out which Jews have said that they're Christians but are still practicing Judaism in secret. That you just now read from Martin Luther, the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, probably would have written the same words. We know this kind of desperate feeling that the hatred of the Jews for being Jews. I grew up on that. I remember lessons about the Crusaders that I was out the door running faster than anybody else. That's a part of who and what we are. So what I'm trying to say is we're not surprised by this, but I'm also not surprised that God uses even sometimes the hatred of the Jews for his purposes.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing that we have to recognize, right? Like the bottom line is we love Israel because God commanded us to. Now I have to do this, and this is a bummer. I have to end the show right now because I promised Tom Hughes that I was going to record with him at 1:00. And it's
1 o'clock.
super late in Israel right now.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to keep him waiting. So I'm going to go ahead and end. Let me just ask this one question. How will the IDF retaliate after a drone killed at least 4 Israelis and wounded 68 Israelis? How did that drone make it in without the defensive mechanism to snuff it out? Mucho problema. So we talked about a good portion of that question.
And there will be technology and there will be a system to take out the drones. I mean,
yes, but I think the answer to this, and I got to end because Tom's waiting for us, and I want you to answer this very quickly. They're going to destroy the drone factories. They're already doing it.
yes.
They're already doing it.
Yes.
But a quick, I'll give you the last word, bro, before
Well,
we
they're
close
going to
up.
destroy we're destroying the drones. What we need to do is we need to get into Lebanon, and we need to turn Lebanon into a place that is not hostile to Israel.
That's
That's
right.
the first thing.
That's right.
Second thing is Israel will probably go against the drone factories in Iran. That's one of the reasons that Russia is worried. And third is there will be a technology. I think it's going to be some kind of acoustic technology that will manage or give us a way to deal with the drones. Fourth, you know that the iron beam, and that's an issue, a laser system that takes out drones is probably the next way to kind of deal with that.
100%. 100%. Okay, last words, bro. I'm going to give it to you.
It's coming. I mean, pray for Israel right now. Pray for the Middle East. Pray that the hand will tilt it in the direction of Iran falling apart and not the other way around.
Amen. Okay, David, you want to close in prayer for us, brother?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
Avinu Shabashamayim, this is your world. These are your politics. These are your people. This is your military. All of this belongs to you. Just help us to understand what you want from us and help us to move all of everything that we do for your glory. Be with Israel. Israel has suffered twice for their iniquity. And just hold up the people, give them the resilience, both militarily and spiritually, and come and bless my people. My people need Jesus right now more than anything else. I pray for that more than anything. In the name of Jesus, the greatest Jew who ever lived. Amen.
Amen. We love you guys. God bless you. Keep fighting the good fight. We got some great shows coming up. Tomorrow, Countdown to Eternity. We've got some great video on Thursday that talks about the very subject we're talking about. David's got some videos coming. Stay tuned. We got a lot of stuff coming. Love you guys. God bless you. Keep fighting the good fight.